Hey everybody, I tried to make this a live video on YouTube, but the audio gets all funky every time I try it. Um, so today I want to talk about basically elaborating on what I talked about last time, which is creating structure now and creating that the environment that you want to be living in for the next, I don't know, hopefully not too long, but likely months right now. Um, So I had my first virtual client meeting this week, right? And went over some stuff, and I'm going to share that with the rest of you. And really, some of the really just the tips for everybody out there right now. Again, I would say limit the access to these preferred items because we're all in a honeymoon period right now, right? We're all building forts in the living room, eating ice cream for lunch, and just chilling. Some schools district like mine here in Babylon, we're still waiting for schoolwork. Doesn't start until Monday. So last week we started my daughter on her own schedule, right? I used luckily my fiance is a DOE teacher, right? So we just created a daily schedule for her, and we'll flesh that out. But even just a structure right now before we have work, if we can look a little closer, right? Breakfast and shower, 9 o'clock, not bad for a kid, right? Doing an hour and a half of schoolwork. For right now, we do like self improvement stuff because she doesn't really have any schoolwork yet. Daily chores that she has to do, her lunch and her break, reading, self improvement. Got exercise movement in there too, right? So I recommend all parents doing the same. I can create a little more. I can create my own kind of schedule that looks a little bit cooler, and I'll post up on the website. That's southshoremethod.com. You'll see more stuff like that. So today, real quick, I want to go through some of the advice that I'm giving to parents who are having trouble with behaviors at home because they're not used to having their kids try to do schoolwork. And so a lot of kids, special needs kids or kids who have, kind of behavioral issues are going to be pushing back real hard this week. And a lot of parents might be asking like, why me? Why is this happening? Right. And the reason really it's pretty simple is that your child is trying to create their own reality, right? They want what they want. Um, so what that means is they're pushing as far as they can get, right? So they can create this new norm for them, which might be like, I don't want to do schoolwork. So those behaviors are directly related to not wanting to do schoolwork. So you have to make doing schoolwork and doing it all well, right? Contingent. And so if they want that access to that iPad, let's just use the iPad, right? If they want access to the iPad, they're going to have to do a series of things, right? So this is something I created for one of my clients, but I think this works for everybody. And I'm going to have blank ones up on the website as well that you can fill in, right? And so we split it up into, I'll go through this one first. We split it up into three different categories, right? You have morning, lunchtime, and afternoon. And you can split that however you want. Now, lunchtime does not mean when you're eating lunch. It's just a convenient way to split the school day into three parts. I also recommend ending the school day for all the kids at 3 o'clock, no matter what. But this will allow you to ask the kid if they're doing the right thing while they're doing their work, right? So here, let's say with this client, right, they want to give her, which is down from her normal, from where we started, right, talking about an hour and a half a day of whatever that is, recreation or preferred items. Usually like screen time, iPad we're using, right? So 30 minutes iPad in the morning if the child finishes their work, keeps their cool, which means like no physical aggression or verbal aggression. Did I use school appropriate language at home? Did I work quietly? And did I show appropriate effort? Now, if I did these three things in the morning, I get 30 minutes. All right. I did these three things at lunchtime, I get 30 more minutes. I do these things in the afternoon, I get that last 30 minutes, and that gets my full hour and a half a day. Now, this also leaves room for, because a lot of parents will ask me, like, well, how do I motivate them throughout the day? Like, as soon as they lose their 30 minutes in the morning, they're going to be really upset. Well, that's why each one of these times, right, you're basically a reset. So we can all have a bad morning, but then we get to lunchtime and we can improve and we can still earn an hour a day of that stuff, right? But what this does, it makes doing your schoolwork and doing it well in the way that you want, contingent, right? Upon like so using their iPad is contingent upon doing all the things that you want them to do. Um, the other tool that I recommend, and we can go kind of in later videos, I'll kind of talk more in depth about, right? Um, there's this thing, which for my daughter, this is a little funkier and a little more used, right? We got some food stains on it, and she's personalized it, right? And it's definitely been through some things because it's a living thing. We had to adjust this because before COVID, her reward was going to have a multiple person sleepover, which is a big deal for her, right? Because one, I don't like to have like sleepovers generally, right? We live in a kind of a small space here, but more than one girl or two girls, three girls, like it's kind of nuts. And my daughter knows that like I don't particularly like fancy that, so I left that here, right? This is something I was talking about last time, was saying that you better make sure that your reinforcers for your kids are reinforcing for them, not what you think will be reinforcing for them, but something they really want that's a little extraordinary. Because if you're asking them for extraordinary behavior change, you have to offer them something, right? So this is boss for a day, which basically means that she gets a day off of school and she doesn't have to do her self improvement. She doesn't have to do all those things that I ask her to do that her boring dad, forces her to do, her cruel dad, instead of being on TikTok or the iPad, which, I don't let her on TikTok. We can talk about that later. But this is called the boss bar for me, right? It's based upon ideas called token economies, where these values here, right? These are currency on the boss bar. Where if she does her chores, which she's supposed to do every day, right? Tidy her room, vacuum, clean the cat bowls, brush the cats. I think there's a couple extra stuff on there. Self improvement for 30 minutes, right? So these are practicing a skill. I'll show you. Practicing a skill or learning a new skill, right? Then there's the read for 30 minutes. And for a little while, she had a +3 for Harry Potter because she just couldn't sit down and read it, but we're not even messing with that anymore. I have to remove that. So 5, try new foods, and she gets actually 6 bonus points for trying new veggies and 6 bonus points for trying something weird, which we say like, international food. If she had like Indian food or something like that, we would give her more points for that. Meditate for 10 minutes, something that like she really doesn't want to do. So I value it more at 10, right? And I tell her, if you did meditate for whatever, how many days in a row, you get your boss day pretty quick. The last one is kind of like, this is something I encourage parents to do if they're going to create one of these token economies, right? So step 1 is to create this little bar, right? So each one of these hashes, that's one of those, it's opposite right now. That's over here. That's one of these values, right? So these 2, 2, 2, 2, those are these like pen strokes right here. So each one of those marks, right, is a little bit of currency. So she would get 10 marks for meditating for 5 minutes, right? Now, talking about this last goal, show maturity or grit or whatever value you want to kind of put out there for your kids that may be a little some word like like abstract, like it's not. You can kind of say like being a good girl or being a good boy or being a good kid. You can put that as something, and that you can just, that's an easy way to just reward your kid whenever they do something that you like that's not already on this list. But doing this incentivizes, just like having a job, right? Where if your employer wants you to do something, right, they put a checklist on it, and usually it's like you get paid for doing things, like you get paid for showing up for work, right? And part of your responsibilities lines up like this. This is a way to just incentivize the kid to say that, just like, not only do I want you to do these things, I'm offering you something. I'm offering you something that like is a little something like I don't really want, that's valuable to you. Not that I don't really want, but like that's a big ask for me. So some other parents, when those things like, these boss for a day stuff, although they'll be like, maybe like you don't let them on Instagram, right? Or you don't let them use whatever it is, or you don't let them watch PG-13 movies. Well, maybe they can watch a PG-13 movie if they do all this stuff that you want them to do, where you're asking them to make significant behavior change. Well, you should be offering them something. Because I said so just doesn't work. It doesn't. And we know as parents, like, if you don't put the right incentives in, right, kids are never going to do what you want. Now, some parents might say, well, I could give my kid a little smack on the mouth, or I'll take away everything away, I'll punish him. I'm like, sure, you know what? On some level, those things might work. But the after effects of of those techniques, right? So if you start hitting your kid every time that they misbehave, well, like kind of I did when I was a kid, like you learn that that's over pretty quickly. And once you're not scared of getting hit anymore, well, then the parent has to up their game and they got to hit the kid a little harder. And then you get to a point where it's like all of a sudden, like your child might be bigger than you, and now you're trying to haul off and hit them as hard as you. It's just it starts, a little like chain reaction, or it builds up where it's not going to work out for you, right? That's now you're actually incentivizing the kid not to listen to you, right? And if you just smack them real quick, it's over and they continue to do whatever behavior you don't want them to do. If you incentivize them by like offering them something, right? They're more likely to change their behavior. This is science. This is like the principle of positive reinforcement. It works on everybody as long as you have the right type of reinforcement. So, when my daughter Soleil, when she finishes this, right, when she gets to the end and she finishes level 3, she gets that boss for a day, which means that like short of like her doing anything inappropriate, right? I can't tell her what to do. And that means a lot to kids, that autonomy. Unless they do whatever they want to do all the time anyway. Which, if you watch my last video talking about restricting their access to those reinforcing things, means that the kids, you're going to be able to get more out of them. If they play Minecraft 6 hours a day on the iPad, offering them, saying that like, I'm going to offer you, hey, you can use the iPad after you finish your work. They're going to be like, I use my iPad all the time anyway. And since we don't have a lot of stuff, we can't take kids out. Because I say some of my other clients are like, we'll take them to a store that they love, right? They'll go to like a big box store that's maybe 30 minutes away and it's kind of a big deal, right? Well, right now that's not available to people. So we got to come up with new solutions. Like with my daughter, I wanted to offer her that sleepover. I can't now. So I got to get creative. So she really, well, she's adjusting. She doesn't really like having this really structured day and doing all these things, even though she's not at school and the school is even asking her to do this stuff yet. So I got to offer her relief from that. And that's motivating for her right now. We've got to find, and this is like, you want to talk to me one-on-one. And really, I want your questions, your cases. Please, go to the website, fill out the form, leave some comments here in the YouTube, email me. Generally, it's that's appointments at southshoremethod.com. Even if you don't want an appointment, right, we can just talk. I'm trying to start this new YouTube thing and transitioning into this remote world of doing things. Send me whatever questions. I'll answer them. Send me the problem, and I'll try to identify it as best I can. In the future, if we want to get on, we can do these Skype things. We can record them, help other people. My other clients next week, I think we're going to record our session. You guys can kind of see how I work. And I encourage any other parents who want to start doing this, right? If you want to contract my services, we can make this as a using tool for a lot of other people. Now, that is not, I understand that most parents don't want their business out there, and that's not something that I'm offering to everybody. But if you feel like this stuff can help other people, I'm going to share it. All this knowledge needs to be shared. I'm not trying to hoard this. I'm not trying to make money off of this. I'm trying to make a living, right? But I want you to spread this knowledge. My expertise is coming up with the conceptualization, right? Figuring out what those antecedents, what's causing those behaviors, and what actually is motivating these kids. That's where the South Shore methods, tying in of evolutionary psychology, really comes into play. Because I think, like I talked last time, I am of the belief that people need to belong to groups, and they need that group acceptance. And I'm going to do another video maybe right after this about compassionate detachment, which is a term I've come up with, which is a great way for parents to think about being compassionate to their child in the future by being stern with them, by holding their ground and providing those consequences, so that that person later in life can self-cope, can show up to work on a bad day, can not explode at their friends when they get into arguments, or have better romantic relationships and personal relationships in their lives in general in the future. That's the compassion we're having for them later, right? Like we think that preventing our kids from suffering is compassion in the moment, when in fact you're actually causing them much more suffering later in their life because you're not willing to let them self-cope and suffer, as from your perspective in this moment. In another video, I'll go into much more detail. This one, I wanted to just start talking about, one, setting that daily checklist, which again, I'll put this PDF up. This will be available to everybody through the website. And this is, you put whatever this is. So this could be, if you're transitioning and your kid's on there for 8 hours a day, you can start with 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour, right? And especially if they can't get here, if they can't do these things, if they can't achieve these goals, we need to think about adjusting that, because these goals right here, like, let's say like your child does not work quietly and every day they fail to get this. Well, then this thing won't work. These have to be attainable goals. They have to be clear goals. They have to be explained, right? So keeping your cool needs to be defined for your kid as, you don't raise your voice at me, you don't use certain language, you don't hit me, right? That's keeping your cool. Finishing your work, working quietly, like all of these things can be adjusted. This is just for this specific kid. So I encourage you to kind of use the blank one, and consult with me if you're having trouble figuring this out. If it's not working, right, that's because usually like the goals don't line up with the kid. And so we can always adjust that properly so that the kids can feel like they can accomplish these things and are reinforced. If they don't get there, if they aren't able to do these things, it doesn't work. It has to be positively reinforced. Think about going to work and you work really hard, and at the end of the week, your boss is like, yeah, but I didn't like the way you do that, so I'm not giving you a paycheck. Well, you don't show up to work next week, right? You're like, I did 4.5 days of great work, and, I got a headache on Friday afternoon, and I didn't finish this report, and now my boss says he doesn't want to pay me. Well, I need to go find a new job, right? Because there's no incentive for me to do this work for this guy. You think about that for your kids. That's the same concept that's going on with your children. They need that paycheck, and that paycheck has to mean something, right? They have to want that. And if they get paid all the time anyway, right? If they were rich, if you have $10 million and I want you to go work at Taco Bell, well, it's going to be hard to motivate you to get those tacos made in the right way, right? Because it doesn't matter to you. So, like I was saying last week, limiting access to reinforcers, right? To limiting access to those preferred activities at that fun time, right? That is going to create the incentive. If the kid has, a room full of video games and he's like just streaming all day and like, he's just like kids, like think about like if you watch South Park, there's like the Eric Cartman. Eric Cartman is such a lousy kid, right? Now, if everybody doesn't know this, I'll try to think of another one. But if Eric Cartman is such a lousy kid because he's the boss of his mom, because even when he's a terrible little guy, his mom gives him everything he wants, right? And that's why Eric Cartman's health isn't so great. That's why Eric Cartman's, concept of things and his friendship and all these other things stink. He's a sneaky little kid because he bosses his mom around. In order for your kid to be a well-adjusted kid and to do well with others and to be able to persevere and self-cope and all these other things, you have to regain that authority in your household. And that's one of the first steps I usually do with those clients who come to me with behavioral problems at home, is we reestablish authority. If you have any suggestions for me, leave them in the comments, right? Email me about topics you want to hear about things you want explained. I encourage the participation. I want to start anybody who wants to come tell me about their stories, about their behavior change stories, or conversely, a lot of what I'm trying to do here is to bring attention to a lot of stuff that people just aren't talking about and people aren't sharing, right? Their special education nightmare stories. Their stories of how the system, either mental health or education system, has failed them. I want to hear those stuff, and I want to speak to them, and we can talk about the things that we can do to change that. So I'll wrap this up so these videos aren't too long, so that I have everybody's attention there. Click subscribe, please. Spread the word. Go to the website, southshoremethod.com. I'm going to be posting these PDFs, as well as I have parent data sheets, which maybe I'll leave for another time. I think next video, as soon as I get some of the supplies in the mail, Amazon's a little slow right now because, you know, as soon as I get new boards and stuff, I'm going to show parents how to create these boards pretty easily. Just using a whiteboard, some white labels, a couple markers, dry erase markers, and you're off to the races. Every single client I've worked with who has actually stuck to this has seen miraculous behavior change. The type of behavior change that they write books about, right? We're just getting off the ground. You know, I'm doing a million things at once in the middle of this crazy, crazy time. But I'm confident that the South Shore method is going to take off because it works. Um, so, yeah, stay tuned. I think next video, I'm going to talk about compassionate detachment, and I'll have some stuff on the website about compassionate detachment too, so people can understand it a little bit better. But it is one of the absolute necessities you're going to need as a parent for creating positive behavior change in your kid, because it allows you to be mindful of the moment and your overarching goal, right? Which is to create a whole, sufficient, mentally healthy person as an adult, right? Um, and sometimes caving in and giving our kids what we want in the present might be preventing them from reaching that goal for themselves, and that goal that you set for them. It will prevent you from getting there. Is sometimes it's just giving in the moment, and not wanting your children to be upset, or not wanting to deal with the aftermath of enforcing some of this hard to do stuff. Changing your behavior is difficult. That's actually what most of my interventions ended up being about. So parents, I know it's tough. Please reach out. In the comments, I'll try to address some of this stuff. Again, if you want, go to the website, southshoremethod.com, spelled the way it's supposed to. Click subscribe. I'm looking I have a Facebook page now as well. Check us out on Facebook. You're going to create a Twitter account sometime today or this weekend. Check that out. I'll be tweeting these videos and tweeting tips and stuff like that, all for parents who are, cooped up in COVID. This stuff is invaluable. So, see you guys next time. Toodaloo.